Hi folks, we'd like to welcome you to the showing of the overdose prevention show that we have in Revere. My name is Gary Langis. I work for the City of Revere and on the MassCall2 grant to prevent fatal overdose in the City of Revere. And we're here today to talk about our Revere Beach Memorial that we're having on September 23rd. Everyone is welcome. It's at 7 o'clock. Down at the bandstand in Revere Beach, and would like to see you come down. This is our 6th annual Revere Beach Memorial, and today I have some guests, and this is the reason that we do the memorial down in Revere Beach. I have today with me, I have Kenny and Linda and JoAnn, and all three have lost a child to fatal overdose, and so we want to paint a picture of like who the folks are that we're losing to overdose. Overdose is the leading cause of accidental death in Massachusetts currently. It outnumbers fatal automobile accidents, and it's a problem. We're trying to address it, and one of the ways we try to address it is, let people know who we're losing. And these are our children, our brothers and sisters, our parents. And we want to make a difference in the community, and I'd like to introduce my panel this morning, and I guess we can start with Kenny. Kenny, if you could just tell us a little bit about Casey and who he was and what he did. And I mean, I know I've met him like years ago, and I've seen the pictures of him, and he's just another kid that should be hanging around like the mall right now. And,
Well, I'm from Swampscott, Mass. I describe ourselves as an average middle-class family, and my wife and I have 3 kids. The 2 older are by my wife's first marriage, so they're really my stepkids. And we had one son of our own who would be 28 this year, and his name is Casey. And of course, we were both thrilled to have a kid together. And it was my first real son, although the older 2 kids might as well be my own biologically. Anyway, Casey was a great little guy, and he was doted on and by the whole family. His 2 siblings were 10 and 12 years older than he, so he got a lot of attention, you might say. But he just, was a fun guy and a smart kid and well loved, and grew up to. Was a very good student. I think he may never have really loved school. He was just full of hell sometimes, but anyway, he was very well behaved, and we used to do a lot of things together, like baseball, and we did trips to Maine and camped and fished, and I really loved fishing, and he got him into fishing, and anyway, he did well through junior high school, and he got to high school, and we went through typical behavior of 14, 15-year-old kids who pulling away, and whose friends became more important than parents, I'd say. But anyway, I think my wife would describe it, one day he went to take out the trash and never came home. He started probably his sophomore year, or hanging out with different kids, different behaviors. I think in his effort to be one of the popular guys, he started hanging around with older kids that were maybe a year older at that point. And these kids were probably in his class, but were, these were the guys who were a little older. They were, let's say, the D students instead of the A students. And I'm not trying to blame other kids for his demise, but he just went off on that path to be one of the popular kids, and started, I would imagine, with marijuana and I think just about that time, and this was around the 2000, year 2000, or maybe just a little bit before that, because he would have been 28 today, the late 1900s. That's the time, it seems to me, that these pills started becoming in vogue, the Percocets and whatever the kids discovered that if they crushed them, inhaled them, or whatever they did with them, they would give them a high. And then OxyContin came along, and that was his real undoing. Our two older kids, being 10 years older, they look back and said, "Gee, Monetti, we smoked a little dope and drank, and that was about it." But anyway, I think what happened is Casey, he got addicted to oxys later in high school, and we didn't really find this out until his senior year, and in the summer of his senior year, he finally admitted he was addicted to OxyContin. And we had, this was a popular kid, funny, all his classmates, he was pretty well liked, but during those last couple of years, he really started exhibiting some rebellious type behavior. And well, anyway, got through high school, and we when we figured found out he was addicted, and why he started, who knows? There was maybe an addictive gene in there somewhere, but apparently there was some reason that he started using, and he just was one of those kids who, once he started, didn't want to put it down. Matter of fact, I remember him telling me more than once that, say, "Gee, Dad, I don't know how my friends, that they can use drugs on the weekends or occasionally and then put it down till the next party, but once Casey really got hooked, he didn't want to stop." And so from his high school graduation on, which was, he was 18 till he was year 24, the year he died, it was up and down, and there were times when I thought he was going to get better, but I guess what happened to him, once he started being bothered by these drugs, he didn't know life as an average responsible person would, and he never grew up. He was set there at age 15 or 16, and he had a job or two here and there, but never really knew responsibility. And it got worse. There were times when we had him at a detox, and he'd come home, and at some point in there he moved away from OxyContin to heroin, and he got addicted, and that was really the kiss of death. And he got in trouble. He didn't do anything really bad. All he was doing was trying to feed his habit. But he'd steal a few things from a store, like cigarettes, or he'd get caught driving erratically, and they'd find some small amount of whatever his drug of choice at the time was, and they finally took him to court, and they put him in jail once or twice, but fairly minor things, but I mean, I guess it was the law, so that's what they did. And frankly, every time he went to Middleton, he'd come out and probably get cleared by the court, or we'd bail him out, and we're thinking maybe this was the last time, but I think all he did is meet other addicts in jail, and the result was not sobriety, because they didn't give him any help there. The result was he had more contacts to where to get drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So there were some periods that he did pretty well. We sent him to a long-term program in California where he was sober for 3 or 4 months, and unfortunately when he came back, he fell back into his own old ways. But I think the point was he was a wonderful kid. He lost all his friends because of this drug thing, and he had his druggy friends, and it was hard for us to understand it, but we learned that. I learned, especially through other friends in Al-Anon, and learned to cope. I learned to cope group that this is really an illness. It affects. He was addicted physically, mentally, the whole bit, and it really was impossible, almost impossible for him to turn it around. And Casey told me many times, he said, I know he wanted to get better. I know he did not want to live that kind of life. And he would tell me, and we would get our hopes up, and he would try to get better. But when he became sober for a month or so, he was so miserable that he decided, well, I might as well keep using, because at least when I'm using, I don't feel so bad. And I know when he was in some detoxes in halfway houses, he unfortunately he had a very low self-esteem, and he looked at himself as an addict, a junkie, and but he did try to help others. I had counselors tell me that were his former counselors how he would console the new kids and that came into the halfway house, and he would say, you don't want to be like me, you have a chance to get better. I wish I had quit early on. And boy, he would have made a great counselor if he could have gotten through this and back on his feet. Anyway, in 2008, at a halfway house in New Bedford, and at that point he hadn't been home in a while. He overdosed. This was probably the third time he overdosed on heroin, but this time it killed him, and he died on July of 2008, and that's pretty much his story. And we still have his ashes today, and we have a memorial in our backyard, and we have pictures around, think about him all the time, talk about him. I got a lot of wonderful support from our support groups, and folks like Gary who have been helpful. And at this point I'm trying to do what I can to promote drug awareness, and both at the state and local levels, and maybe we can help some others. So if I didn't ramble too much, that's kind of the story.
Yeah. Thank you, Kenny. And that's really the trend. It's been over the last 10 or 15 years. A lot of young folks during the late 90s and early 2000s, they got into the Oxycontin, and it was a medication for pain. It was supposed to be for end-of-life pain, like cancer patients, but it started to be prescribed for like knee injuries, sport injuries, and it got into the community, and it's been here ever since. There's other varieties of drugs out there now, and it always leads to one thing. Like these pills cost like $60, $80 a piece, and like a kid 24 years old, when you have to take 4 or 5 of those a day, you're talking about $400 or $500, and you can go out heroin is really plentiful. If no one knows it, it's really plentiful in the streets of Massachusetts. It's very cheap. So instead of $500 a day, you could spend like anywhere from $40 to $80 a day, and it's the same result. But it's deadly, and I'm sure Casey didn't go out with the intention to overdose. Most overdoses are accidental overdoses. People that have been abstinent from drugs for a little while, that have been away from them for a little while, they might mix another drug with their opiate, like a benzodiazepine, and it becomes fatal. And again, like we want, these are our children. These are kids that like should be hanging around the Gap, should be down the beach now. There's nothing worse than it just goes out of order when you lose a child. Like all of us have lost a child, and it's not the order that I think the universe planned. Now we're going to talk. Linda's going to talk about her daughter Erica for a little bit, and tell us about Erica.
Okay. My daughter. Let's see. Where do I start? I grew up in Chelsea. All our life, I was in Chelsea. I was married very young, had 3 children, 2 boys, Freddie and Chris, basically 2.5 years apart. And then after about 9 years, I felt like, I talked to my husband, I'm like, let's try one more time. Maybe we'll get that little girl and, someone that I can hang out with and, take to dance classes. And so it happened. Like, we planned it and happened. And she was just the love of our life. She was the princess, very spoiled. Her older brothers just loved her and adored her, and basically got her everything she needed. As the years went on, I kept her, and she was in dance recitals, she did cheerleading, she was, very involved with everything. And I want to say that when she went to high school, I started seeing changes in her. She started off with, a private high school, and then she wanted to switch, to Chelsea High and to be with, some of her friends. And that's when I really started to see changes in her. Like, she wasn't the same person, She was going out a lot and, kind of like avoiding me and, and to make a long story short, I think after maybe a few years, I kind of had an intervention with her, myself and my 2 boys. We sat down and said to her, you need to get help. So she agreed to it, and she went to a detox, and it was the first of many detoxes that she would go into over 6 or 7 years. And I'll never forget the first detox that she went to. I was there with my sons, and the counselor came over and talked to us, and the counselor said, I just want to let you know that, only 1% would make it the first time. And I said, oh no. I said, my daughter is going to make it. I'm going to do everything I can for her, keep her in money and coffee and, do everything for her. Because I said she's going to make it. But, the stories are kind of the same as Kenny, too. Like, she would go out with her friends and, they would drink or do whatever. And her friends could get up the next day and go to work. But my daughter, she couldn't. Because, unfortunately, she was getting addicted to it. I remember at one point, she was working 3 jobs, waitressing, making like $500 a day. And she'd never have any money, And it's expensive. Like, the drugs out there, they're so easy to get. And, the habit is so expensive. So as the years went on, like I said, she was in and out of treatments. And then she met a guy after she was in treatment. She was really doing well at the time, and she met a guy. And I didn't really particularly care for him, but they were both doing drugs, and a lot of kids do. So, and what happened is, after a year, she got pregnant. And she came to me and she said, you know, she brought me a picture of an ultrasound. And she said, I'm having a baby. And I thought, oh my God. I'm like, you know, she's so mature, so immature. How can you handle like a baby? And she said, I really want to have a baby. I need someone to love me. And she loved that baby. And, you know, she kind of got her life straightened out. And then, you know, she got an apartment in Chelsea. And she was doing okay. And then I noticed that she started hanging around with different people and kind of avoiding my calls. And like now I not only had my daughter, but I had a grandson that I worried about. That like if I didn't hear from her, like I would be in a panic. Oh my God, is the baby okay? You know, I mean, I realize now that I was actually powerless over her. Like there wasn't anything that I could do for her, but that baby needed me. And, you know, I always had that fear that, oh my God, you know, when something happens and the baby's in the house, and the worst happened. Luckily the baby was okay, but my daughter overdosed on heroin on April 1st, 2011. And I was with her the day before, and she wasn't doing good, and I kind of blame myself for not trying to do something. But she overdosed, and that day I had called her all day, and she wasn't returning my calls. And when I got home from work that day, I had a police officer at my door to tell me that they found her dead, and that the baby was okay, and that they brought the baby, you know, to get checked out. And I know that she didn't want this to happen. She was a wonderful person. She loved that baby more than life. And, you know, the baby right now is with relatives out of state, and I do get to see him. His name is Jamie, and he's actually going to be 3 years old in September. And there's a reason, like, I have this baby now to remind me of my daughter, Erica. And I'm grateful for that I have the baby, and I'm also grateful for my family and my friends in the Al-Anon. You know, I go to the meetings on Wednesday night, and there's just so much support and love that they all give us. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Linda. You know, I know this isn't easy to talk about. You know, every time I think of my son, it just like stirs it up. And when I hear stories so similar, it's just really extremely painful and powerful. You know, and I appreciate, you know, you sharing it with us. And
Thank you.
you know, like I know, you know, that counts as saying, you know, 1%. A detox is a detox, and a detox medically detoxes folks, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lifetime thing to stop using drugs. You know, it's not. There's no magic bullet. There's, you know, I know they have all kinds of treatment now with Suboxone and Vivitrol and the methadone, and you know, but none of these things work without other things, you know, added. And that's like getting a life, growing up, and doing like the things you have to do. And it's just like, you know, a lot of times folks will say, "What do I have to do?" And I said, "You just need to change one thing." And they said, "Well, that's it?" I said, "Yeah, it's your whole life, you know." And it's a really hard thing to do when you're battling and struggling with addiction, to change everything, to change like the way you think, to change your friends, to change everything that you have believed in through your addiction. So I know it's really it's difficult, especially for this new generation of drug users that are coming up, that have started with pills that you think they're harmless things because a doctor prescribes them to you, and then it just grips you, and they don't know how to like cope with it. It's like, you know, they have to do things they never thought they'd have to do. You know, our next speaker is JoAnn, and she's going to tell us about her son Frank. And JoAnn's part of the Revere Beach Memorial Committee that we're planning for the 23rd. Go ahead, JoAnn, you're on.
Hi, my name is JoAnn Rivieccio, and my son Frankie passed away on November 15th of 2009. And I'm very thankful to have had people like Chris Alber and yourself to help me through the pain and suffering that I deal with every day. Frankie was a wonderful kid, born 7 weeks early. He was full of ball of fire. And growing up, he didn't have the same problems in high school. His problems started about when he was 22. Of course, he drank, and he was with people, and he had a good time. Unfortunately, he decided he was going to buy a motorcycle. And I said, no, Frankie, you don't want to do that because you won't pay attention. Well, in less than a month, he had a motorcycle accident. Both bones in his leg were broken, and his wrist. So for 12 weeks, he was incapacitated. And in the hospital, they put him on OxyContins. At the time, he asked if it was addictive, and no one really gave him any answers to that. But that was his downfall for over 10 years. Frank worked for the post office. He was a wonderful kid. He made everybody happy. Lots of people loved him. But he also had another problem, too, alcohol. So I had put him in rehab. He put himself in rehab at least 5 or 6 times. And each time it would work for a little while, and then he would be on drugs again. Unfortunately, it got to be a real bad habit where he was consuming either $300 or $400 a day habit. But he didn't go out, he didn't steal, but his whole paycheck went to this. And eventually, he ended up going to heroin, which really is a terrible drug. It's, some of them are too powerful. I mean, it's not like it's regulated OxyContin where they know what they're taking. Heroin, you don't know if it's strong, or if it's pure, or whatever, and that's what happened. One day I was working and my son called me. I was a little bit upset. Someone had triggered him and he started drinking. And I wasn't able to talk to him for the whole day. And when I come home, he was sleeping. I was very thankful for that. I went in to see if he was breathing, and he was, and I said, this is good. Well, I've always worried about him, and I had this feeling that someday I would be burying him. And 2 days before he had passed away, he said to me, I don't want to die, I want to live. And he was going through the EAP program at work, trying to get help. But unfortunately, he was trying to better himself, like running for a representative of his union. He was so happy. And then someone said something very negative. And because his self-esteem was so low, he just couldn't deal with that. So he must have evidently got up and found some heroin. And normally I do check on him, and he said, Ma, I don't want you checking on me anymore. I didn't. The next morning I woke up, made him breakfast, and I went in to see how I could help him, and it was too late. He was already gone. It's a terrible experience to ever go in and find your son dead, or anybody for that matter. I had to wait 4 hours for medical examiner and people to come in and help me. Luckily, I worked with the police department, so they were able to console me, and I knew them. But it was the toughest experience of my life. All I can say is, it doesn't matter. This is your child. You don't need to be embarrassed about getting them help. Get them help. They didn't plan on being junkies. It just happened. So if you can go out there and get as much help as you can, do it, because it's well worth saving your children or your brother, your sister, or any relative, as a matter of fact. Drugs are bad, and we need to help people. That's all I can say. Please help your family and your loved ones. Sorry, Gary.
There's stories like this. We're four people. There's 2 people a day that overdose in Massachusetts and die. So we're just a small portion of parents, and there's parents all across the state, and unfortunately all across the country, dealing with this stuff every single day. Every single day this happens to a parent. 2 parents in Massachusetts. 4 parents sometimes. But it's it's difficult stuff, and in this state We've started to do things to address the problem. In 2008, 15 communities in Massachusetts got grants through the federal government to work on these issues, work on fatal overdoses in Massachusetts. And through a lot of that work, you know what? Overdose has gone down a bit, and now it's back up again because there's so many people using drugs, and they switch over from pills to heroin so fast. It just happens, you know. And I just like to invite you down to the memorial, and you know, and I'm sure, like, you know, you'll meet a lot of JoAnns and Lindas and Kennys down there, remembering their family members that have passed away from a fatal overdose. And you know, we need to really address this issue because it's not getting any better. It's you know, with the economy the way it is, it's job loss. It just puts people into a bad place where they look for relief, and a lot of our friends, family members, and other community members, you know, turn to drugs. They turn to, like, you know, drinking, like, because that's going to give them a little relief. And we know that it doesn't. It just, you know, like, it might be a temporary thing, but like, it just, you know. So on this September 23rd, we will be having the memorial down Revere Beach. This is last year's memorial. There's some folks down. This is the beginning of the memorial. We had hundreds of people down there to remember all the losses, and bring pictures of, if you want to come down, you have pictures you want to bring, you can bring pictures down, and either hold them like this woman on the screen, or there's a board down there where you can pin some pictures up, and poems, whatever you like. And it's just one night to, you know, remember and give a little, like, you know, relief for, you know, people to realize that we're not alone, that, you know, we're in this together. You know, we're not, this isn't just one parent that's losing their child. It's a whole bunch of people in Massachusetts. Like 637 families a year lose their somebody in their family. We have parents speaking, you know, about their losses down there. You know, try to have some information down there about some resources that are going on. And we do the bagpipes, the readings of the names of the folks that have died, and then we end up with a candlelight vigil at the end of the event. So please come down if you have a chance. 7 o'clock. It's a Sunday evening, Revere Beach, and we'd love to see you down there. And we hope we don't have to add many more numbers to the list of names that we have to read every year. You know, I hope we can really get a handle on this problem and do something about it. You know, but in the meantime, we're going to try to stay around to support each other in our losses. And I'd like to thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.